If you look at me right now, you probably see a stereotype. 35 years old, a faded band t-shirt, coding socks. I work from home in tech, which, to a certain generation, translates to he plays World of Warcraft until noon and sends 3 emails a day. I don't wear a Rolex. I drive a 4-year-old Subaru Outback because it's practical for the dog. I don't feel the need to project my net worth onto the world. Quiet confidence, my grandfather used to call it. You know what you have. You don't need to shout about it. Unfortunately, quiet confidence doesn't register with my in-laws. To them, if you aren't wearing a suit that costs more than my car, commuting into a glass tower in the city, and loudly berating a waiter about the vintage of the Cabernet, you aren't a real man. You're a hobbyist, a drifter. For 7 years, I've been the punching bag for my wife's father, Robert, and her older brother, Chad. They are the living embodiment of corporate arrogance. They run a legacy financial consulting firm that Robert inherited from his father. They think they are the masters of the universe. They view my career, freelance software architecture and specialized algorithm development, as cute. Like I'm building Lego sets in the basement while the adults do serious business. My wife, Sarah, she's amazing. She's a pediatric nurse, the kindest soul you'll ever meet. She loves me for who I am, not what I earn. She's always tried to shield me from their toxicity, to play peacemaker. But you can only hold back a tidal wave of narcissism for so long. They didn't know the truth. Sarah knew I did well, that we were comfortable, debt-free, and maxing out retirement accounts. But she didn't know the scale of it. She didn't know that 6 years ago, I was one of 3 silent founders of a decentralized data sharding platform that got acquired by Google for an obscene amount of money. She didn't know that my current freelance work is mostly managing my own 9-figure private equity portfolio, focused on distressed tech assets. I never told them because I didn't want our relationships to change. I didn't want Sarah to look at me differently, and I sure as hell didn't want Robert and Chad suddenly pretending to respect me because of my bank balance. I wanted them to respect me because I make their daughter and sister happy. That was obviously too much to ask. The tension had been building for months. The economy was tightening, and I'd heard rumblings through my network that Robert and Chad's firm, Sterling and Finch, was bleeding cash. They were over-leveraged in commercial real estate and losing clients to leaner, more tech-savvy competitors. But instead of humbling them, the pressure just made them nastier. Like wounded animals, they lashed out at the easiest target, the guy in the hoodie who didn't have a real job. It all came to a head last Saturday. It was Robert's 60th birthday party. This wasn't a backyard barbecue. This was a black-tie affair at a rented historic mansion that probably cost more to book for the night than my parents paid for their first house. It was an aggressive display of wealth, designed to convince their nervous investors that everything at Sterling and Finch was just fine. Sarah was anxious the whole drive over. She was wearing a stunning emerald green dress I'd bought her, looking like royalty. I was wearing a suit. It was a nice suit off the rack, tailored well. But it wasn't a bespoke Italian masterpiece like the ones Robert and Chad wore like armor. "Promise me you won't let them bait you," Sarah pleaded, gripping my hand in the car. "Dad's stressed about work and Chad is just Chad. Please, Mark, for me, just do the gray rock thing." "Gray rock," I agreed. "Be uninteresting, be boring, don't react." It was my standard operating procedure around them. When we walked into the grand ballroom, the scent of expensive lilies and even more expensive cologne hit me like a physical blow. It was a sea of tuxedos and glittering jewelry. Robert was holding court near the open bar, looking flushed and loud. Chad was right beside him, laughing too hard at his father's jokes, scanning the room to make sure people were watching them be important. They spotted us. The smiles didn't reach their eyes. "Well, well," Robert boomed, his voice carrying over the string quartet. "Look who decided to grace us with his presence. Sarah, darling, you look magnificent." He kissed her cheek, then turned his gaze to me. It was the look a gardener gives a particularly stubborn weed. "And Mark, you found a tie. Didn't think they allowed those in your home office." "Happy birthday, Robert," I said evenly, handing him a bottle of very rare aged scotch I'd selected from my personal collection. He barely glanced at it before handing it to a passing waiter. "Chad," Robert said, clapping his son on the shoulder, "get Mark a drink. Something simple, a beer maybe. I'm not sure his palate is ready for the good stuff we're serving tonight." Chad smirked, slicking back his already helmet-like hair. "Sure thing, Dad. Hey Mark, how's the little computer thing going? Still typing away in your pajamas while the rest of us keep the economy running?" Around them, a circle of their VP sycophants chuckled dutifully. "Work is fine, Chad. Thanks for asking," I said, employing the gray rock. "Fine? That's good," Chad pressed, stepping closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of 3 martinis. "We just closed the Anderson account today. 8-figure deal. That's what real work looks like, Mark. High stakes, pressure. You wouldn't understand what it's like to have actual responsibility." The Anderson account, I thought. I knew for a fact they hadn't closed it. They had barely retained it by slashing their fees to near zero margins just to keep the revenue on the books for Q3. It was a desperation move. "Sounds intense," I said neutrally. I spent the next 2 hours dodging them. I stayed at the edge of conversations, ate the overpriced canapés, and smiled politely when random cousins asked if I was still doing that internet thing. I watched Sarah work the room, charming everyone, trying so hard to be the perfect daughter. It broke my heart that she felt she had to perform for these people. Then came the speeches. We were all seated at round tables draped in heavy silk. Robert was at the head table, looking like a king on a throne. Several people gave standard toasts, praising his business acumen, his leadership, blah, blah, blah. It was nauseating, knowing what I knew about their balance sheet. Then Robert stood up to give his thank you speech. He was drunk now. Not sloppy drunk, but that arrogant, mean kind of drunk where the filter completely dissolves. He started by talking about legacy, about building Sterling and Finch from what his father gave him. "It takes grit," Robert bellowed into the microphone, swaying slightly. "It takes a spine to be a captain of industry. My son, Chad, he has it. He's a killer in the boardroom. He understands that you eat what you kill." Chad beamed, preening under his father's praise. Then Robert's eyes found Sarah and me at table 12, near the kitchen doors. The shift in his tone was immediate. It went from boisterous to venomous. "And then there's my beautiful Sarah," he said, his voice thick with faux pity. "My kind, sweet Sarah. You know, as a father, you want the best for your little girl. You want her to marry a titan, someone who can give her the world." The room went very quiet. Sarah froze beside me. Her hand found mine under the table and squeezed so hard her nails dug into my skin. "But sometimes," Robert continued, slurring slightly, gesturing vaguely in my direction with his champagne flute, "sometimes they choose comfort. They choose the path of least resistance. They marry the guy who is just there. The guy who is content to sit on the sidelines, while the real men play the game." A few nervous titters rippled through the room. Chad was grinning openly now. "Let's be honest," Robert laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Sarah, honey, you married a loser. A guy playing video games pretending it's a job. He's never closed a deal in his life. He's never taken a risk. He's a passenger in life, sponging off your hard work at the hospital because he couldn't hack it in the real corporate world." He raised his glass high. "So here's to my son, the future of Sterling and Finch, and here's to my daughter and her charity case." The silence that followed was excruciating. It wasn't a fun roast silence. It was the silence of 200 people watching a father publicly eviscerate his son-in-law and humiliate his daughter. I felt the heat rise up my neck. Not embarrassment, pure, cold rage. I looked at Sarah. She wasn't crying. She was shaking. Her face was pale, her jaw set so tightly I thought her teeth might crack. The gray rock crumbled. I didn't stand up and shout. I didn't flip the table. That's what a powerless person does. Instead, I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Under the table, while the room awkwardly applauded Robert's speech, I opened a secure messaging app. I navigated to a group chat titled Apex Partners Inner Circle. I typed 3 words, buy them out. Then I added a second message, hostile, initiate immediately. Authorization code, Omega-7 actual. I put the phone back in my pocket. The entire exchange took 10 seconds. Sarah stood up abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the marble floor, cutting through the murmurs. "We're leaving," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Robert looked over, confused. "Oh, relax, Sarah, it's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Mark knows his place." Sarah looked at her father with an expression I'd never seen before. It was total disgust. "You are a small, cruel man, Dad, and you have no idea who my husband is." She grabbed my hand. "Come on, Mark." We walked out of the ballroom, heads held high, ignoring the stares. We didn't speak until we were in the car. As soon as the doors closed, Sarah burst into tears. Great, heaving sobs of humiliation and anger. "I hate them," she cried, smacking the dashboard. "I hate him. How could he say that in front of everyone, calling you a loser? You're 10 times the man he is." I pulled the car over to the side of the road and just held her. I let her cry it out. I stroked her hair and told her it was okay. "I'm so sorry, Mark," she choked out. I really tried to make it work with them." "I know you did, honey," I said softly. "It's not your fault." "I don't want to see them again," she said fiercely, wiping her eyes. "I mean it. They are dead to me." I kissed her forehead. "Okay, we're done with them." We drove home in silence, but the mood had shifted. Sarah was resolute. I was calculating. That night, while Sarah finally slept, exhausted from the emotional toll, I went down to my office. I didn't play video games. I got on a secure video conference call with my partners in Zurich and Singapore. "The directive is received, Mark," my lead analyst, Chloe, said, her face illuminated by multiple screens. "We've been tracking Sterling and Finch for 6 months, as per your standing order. They are teetering. Their debt covenants are about to breach. If we move Monday morning, we can acquire a controlling interest for pennies on the dollar before the market even knows they're insolvent." "Do it," I said, sipping cold coffee. "Clean sweep. I want 51% minimum by 9 o'clock a.m. Monday. Use the shell corporations so they don't see my name coming. I want them blindsided." "Understood. What's the end game here, Mark?" "Asset strip and liquidate." I looked at the screen, remembering the look on Sarah's face when her father called me a charity case. "No," I said slowly. "We're not liquidating, we're restructuring. I'm taking the role of active chairman." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "You going corporate, that's unexpected." "It's personal," I said. "Just get it done." Sunday was surreal. I spent the day gardening with Sarah, taking the dog for a long hike, making homemade pizza. We didn't talk about the party. We just existed together in our quiet, comfortable life. Sarah seemed lighter, having finally cut the cord with her toxic family. Meanwhile, my phone was buzzing subtly in my pocket every 20 minutes with updates. 10 o'clock a.m. Sunday. Major creditor agrees to sell debt package. 2:30 p.m. Sunday. 2 junior partners at S&F agree to sell their equity stakes secretly. 8 o'clock p.m. Sunday. We have achieved 53% ownership threshold. The paperwork is finalized. They were mine. Monday morning arrived. Sarah left for her shift at the hospital at 6:30 a.m. I kissed her goodbye, told her I had some errands to run later. Once she was gone, I didn't put on my usual jeans and t-shirt. I went to the back of my closet, past the hoodies, to a garment bag that hadn't been opened in 3 years. I pulled out a charcoal gray suit. It was bespoke, tailored in London on Savile Row. It cost more than Robert's car. I put on a crisp white shirt, a subtle silk tie, and a pair of Oxfords that I polished until they looked like black glass. I looked in the mirror. The tech bro was gone. The loser was gone. The man looking back at me was worth $900 million, and he looked every cent of it. I drove into the city. I didn't take the Subaru. I took the other car from the back of the garage, the Aston Martin DB11 that Sarah playfully rolls her eyes at but secretly loves riding in. I pulled up to the chrome and glass tower where Sterling and Finch occupied the top 3 floors. I parked right in front, in a spot marked, reserved for CEO R. Sterling. The security guard in the lobby stepped forward as I pushed through the revolving doors. "Excuse me, sir, can I help?" He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as he took in the suit, the shoes, the aura. The quiet confidence was no longer quiet, it was deafening. "I'm here for the 9 a.m. board meeting," I said, not breaking stride. "A name, sir." "Mark." I didn't offer a last name. I just kept walking toward the private elevator bank. He didn't stop me. I rode the elevator to the 40th floor. The doors opened onto a plush reception area. The receptionist, a young woman named Brenda who had seen me multiple times in my hoodie when picking up Sarah, literally dropped her phone. Mark, is that you?" she stammered. "Good morning, Brenda. Is the full board assembled in the main conference room?" I asked, my voice low and level. "Yes. Yes, they just started. Mr. Sterling is frantic. Something about a hostile takeover attempt this morning. But you can't go in there, it's closed session." I walked past her desk toward the massive double oak doors of the boardroom. "Mark, you can't," she squeaked behind me. I didn't knock. I threw the doors open. They banged against the interior walls with a sound like a gunshot. The scene inside was chaotic. 10 men in suits were shouting over each other. Papers were strewn across the massive mahogany table. Robert was standing at the head of the table, his face purple, screaming into a speakerphone. Chad was pacing nervously, chewing his fingernails. The room froze. Every head turned toward the door. For a solid 5 seconds, nobody recognized me. They saw the suit. They saw the power. They saw a threat. Then Robert's eyes refocused. Confusion gave way to outrage. "Mark," he spluttered, slamming the phone down. "What the hell are you doing here? How did you get past security? Get out. We are in the middle of a crisis." Chad rushed forward, trying to muster some authority. "Are you insane? You can't just barge in here. Look at you. You're wearing a suit. Who did you steal that from? Get out before I call the cops." He reached out to grab my arm. I didn't move. I just looked at his hand on my sleeve, then looked up into his eyes. The look I gave him was absolute zero. It was the look of a man who knows exactly where the bodies are buried because he bought the cemetery. Chad froze. He hesitated, then slowly pulled his hand back, unnerved. I walked past him, toward the head of the table where Robert stood. The other board members parted like the Red Sea. I threw a thick, leather-bound portfolio onto the mahogany table. It slid across the polished surface and stopped directly in front of Robert. "What is this?" Robert demanded, staring at the folder like it was a bomb. "Read the first page, Robert," I said calmly. He hesitated, looking around the room for support, but nobody moved. With shaking hands, he opened the portfolio. I watched his face. I watched the color drain from it, turning that unhealthy purple into a sickly gray. His eyes bulged. He read the page, then reread it, his lips moving silently. This is impossible, he whispered. Apex Partners, they bought the debt, the equity stakes, but... How? He looked up at me, genuine terror in his eyes now. Who are you? Read the signature line on the bottom of page 3, Robert, I said. He flipped the pages frantically. He found the line. He stared at it. Apex Partners Holdings LLC, authorized signatory, Mark last name. Title, managing partner and majority shareholder. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the HVAC system. Robert looked at me. He looked at the suit. He looked back at the paper. The realization hit him like a freight train. The loser, the charity case, the guy in the hoodie. You, he choked out. You are Apex Partners. I own Apex Partners, I corrected him gently. And as of 8:47 this morning, Apex Partners owns 53% of Sterling and Finch. We own your debt. We own your building leases. We owned you. Chad grabbed the folder from his father's numb hands. He scanned it, his jaw dropping. No way, you're lying. You play video games. I build algorithmic trading platforms, Chad, I said, my voice crisp and echoing in the silent room. And sometimes, when I see a poorly managed, distressingly arrogant company ripe for acquisition, I buy it while I'm having my morning coffee. I walked around the head of the table. Robert was still standing there, paralyzed. Robert, I said politely, you're in my chair. He stared at me blankly for a moment. Then, with the jerky movements of a broken marionette, he shuffled sideways, away from the head of the table. I sat down. It was a very comfortable chair. I looked around the table at the pale faces of the board members. These men who had laughed at Robert's loser jokes on Saturday night were now looking at me like I was God. Gentlemen, I began, clasping my hands on the table. As your new chairman of the board, I've spent the weekend reviewing the financials. They are, frankly, embarrassing. The nepotism, the bloated overhead, the incompetence. It ends today. I turned to Chad. He was trembling. Chad, I said, your division hasn't turned a real profit in 3 years. You retain the Anderson account by offering a fee structure that actually costs this firm money every time you bill them. You're fired. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal items. Chad looked at his father, pleading, Dad, do something. Robert didn't even look at him. He was staring at the floor. Robert, I continued, turning my attention to the man who had humiliated my wife. You have run your father's legacy into the ground while pretending you were a titan of industry. You are removed as CEO, effective immediately. You will retain a seat on the board as a minority shareholder, but you will have no operational authority whatsoever. Your salary is terminated. Robert finally looked up. His eyes were wet. The bluster was gone. He was just an old, defeated man. Mark, please, this is my life. You can't do this. I didn't do this, Robert, I said coldly. The market did this. You were weak, you were slow, and you were arrogant. In my world, that means you get eaten. I pressed the intercom button on the table. Brenda, send in security, please. We have 2 individuals who need escorting out of the building. I leaned back in the chair. The rest of you, we have a lot of work to do to salvage this mess. Let's look at the Q3 projections. I didn't watch Robert and Chad leave. I was too busy working. I got home around 6. I parked the Aston Martin in the garage and changed back into my jeans and a t-shirt. When Sarah got home from her shift, she looked exhausted. She dropped her bag and came into the kitchen where I was making stir-fry. Long day, I asked, kissing her cheek.